Portsmouth Public Media and Center for Wildlife proudly bring to you Creature Feature.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexis with PPM TV. If you hang out with us in the morning, maybe you know me from the Priority One Fitness Show. I don't know, it's pretty early in the morning. But today, as you can see, we're not exercising. We're going to be meeting, if you might have seen another episode, but we're going to be meeting with Bob from the Center for Wildlife in Cape Nettic, Maine, which for us is right up the road. If you're a local, you might know Mount Agamenticus. If you've driven Mount Agamenticus, then I bet you've gone right past them and not even known it. Naturally, there's a reason for that. So in a moment, we're going to welcome Fern, the barred owl. And she brought with him Bob, as I mentioned. So you can see here, I'm donning my shirt. Remember to hop on their website. We'll give you all of the information, but that's where you can find out more about tours, visits, how to have them come to you or you go to them, and of course, how to support. We'll speak more about that in a few minutes.
Good job. Darling. There we go.
Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen. As promised, this is Fern, and as you can tell, it's everything I can do to stand still. We are here with Bob, and of course, Fern, who is a barred owl. Now, I, for some reason, feel very inclined to keep my voice low so as not to disturb her and give her a chance to acclimate, because, of course, she doesn't know where she is or why she's here, but she'll get a chance to pay attention as Bob teaches us more about Fern, barred owls, and of course a little bit more about the Center for Wildlife. So if you're just joining us, Bob is the Marketing and Outreach Coordinator for the Center for Wildlife, which is in Cape Nettic, Maine. Here in Portsmouth, that's just over the bridge right up the road for us. And of course, got my handy dandy t-shirt on. So tell us a little bit about Fern. Welcome, Bob.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so Fern is one of our ambassador animals at Center for Wildlife. She is one of our permanent resident animals that lives with us in sanctuary at the center. So like you mentioned before, our primary mission at Center for Wildlife is to rescue, rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife with the hopes of releasing animals back out to the wild. Fern here, being a part of our resident ambassadorial team, is part of our team of animals that lives with us full-time that can't be released back out to the wild for one reason or another. Fern here, she is specifically with us at the center after she sustained an unfortunate, very severe head injury after a car collision, which is the number one reason that animals come to us for care at Center for Wildlife is unfortunately after being hit by cars. Owls are one of our more common of our species that come to us after sustaining car collisions, unfortunately. They very commonly are found hunting by roadsides, usually in those early evening hours, sometimes even at the darkest hours of night. So it is both difficult for us to see them and difficult for some of our owl species to realize the risks associated with hunting near the roadside. So Fern, she sustained a very severe head injury. She is still flighted. A lot of our animals come to us. A lot of our birds are not able to be released to the wild after sustaining wing injuries, but Fern's injury is a little harder to see from the outside. Hers is a neurological issue after that traumatic head injury.
Now, something I learned about owls, I came to what I would call a symposium on owls in your wonderful outdoor amphitheater. Gorgeous if you get the chance to attend a program. I learned an interesting fact, something that I myself was guilty of, thinking I was maybe doing a good thing. When you have an apple core, don't throw them out the car window. Can you tell us why not?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that I used to do before really being educated on it. If I was eating an apple core or had a banana peel, I would toss it out the window saying, hey, I'm feeding the wildlife. This is, if anything, beneficial. or just not being concerned because it's biodegradable. The issue is that by tossing anything out of our windows, even biodegradable items like an apple core, you are feeding wildlife, you are attracting wildlife to the roadside. So usually by throwing out some of those organic materials, we're attracting some small rodents, some small mammals to the roadside to scavenge for some of that food, which then in turn attracts some of our predatory animals, especially owls. So a road cut through the forest right then and there, first and foremost, just becomes a great hunting habitat. We've cleared some section of forest, but then with that added component of attracting some of those small mammals and rodents to the roadside, it makes it a perfect hunting habitat for owl species. When they are in that hunting mode, they become very hyper-focused on their prey source that they are going to go for, usually not seeing that car coming down the road at about 40 miles per hour, sometimes more. So it's really incumbent upon us to never toss anything out of our car windows. If you are leaving trash down at the end of your driveway as well, we really encourage you to have it in an inaccessible bin as well.
Of course, that makes sense.
Not just tossing your trash bags out on the road, which then again will attract some of those small mammals and rodents and then attract some of our predators as well.
Now you mentioned that, of course, which is frequently the case with your animal ambassadors, injuries can't be seen. Like many people, injuries, illnesses, ailments can't be seen. Of course, we know that she lives with neurological issues. Does she have sight limitations, hearing limitations that you know of?
So we don't suspect that she has very serious sight or hearing impairment, luckily for her. So she still manages to get around decently well within her enclosure. One thing that she definitely lacks a little bit is some of that spatial awareness. But the big primary issue that has arisen due to that head injury is predator awareness. Her inclination to try and get away from predators, us humans initially, for her being a big scary predator. So after sustaining that injury, she was very, very mellow, is still incredibly mellow, but would allow the caretakers just to approach right up to her, pick her up for care. So it's some of those unforeseen complications of that head injury is why she definitely would not be very suitable for life in the wild. She probably would let any predator come sauntering right on up and not do anything to try and get away.
Boy, you are one lucky girl, Fern. Now, she's not only lucky that she has Bob in the Center for Wildlife, she has Byron. Can you tell us about Byron, Bob?
Yes, so we're incredibly, not only was, like you mentioned, she incredibly lucky that she was able to be rescued and brought to us at the center, but we're incredibly lucky to have our ambassadors like Fern and like Byron as well. So Byron is one of our village elders. He's one of our older owls that's well up into his later teens at this point in his life. He lives with Fern. They live together as a bonded pair and have for the entirety of Fern's time with us at the center. One of the incredible things that they do, obviously, is just comforting each other. Living together is very comfortable for them. Byron is very protective of his lady Fern here. But one of the things that they also do for us, one of the incredible roles that they play, is actually acting as foster parents for orphaned owlets that come through our medical clinic. So we're able to take some of these orphaned owls and put them in with Byron and Fern as long as they don't have any physical injuries, and Byron and Fern will become foster parents for those youngsters until they've reached a stage where we can get them safely back out to the wild.
About how old would the owlet be?
So it usually is only a few month process for some of them. It really depends on what stage in their development they come to us. Usually our owls, they're reaching that ability to survive and be out on the wild within sometimes for some of them about 6 months before they are really fledged out those adult plumage and are able to get back out to the wild. So it depends on where in their stage of development they are. Those orphans come to us. Some of them it's only just a few weeks they're with us before they reach that stage, some a matter of months. But we do everything we can to make sure it's best for them, to make sure that we're not keeping them any longer than we need to, but making sure that they have those abilities and skills that they need to be able to survive in the wild.
Any idea how many owlets Fern and Byron might have helped raise?
So we know that Byron has raised at least right over 30 baby orphaned owlets that have been released.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Fern, just a couple in her tenure with us. She has only been with us since 2019, so she's only been with us for a few years at this point. But Byron, having come to us all the way back in 2007, he has done a ton of baby orphaned foster parenting for us.
2007. Can you tell us about the lifespan of an owl?
Yeah, so Byron, our friend, Fern's friend, is definitely getting up there in those later teen years. So in captivity, they can, make it up into those late teen years. On the very rare occasion, up into those early 20s. Every once in a while, you'll hear of an owl up in their 20s, a barred owl. But in the wild, they're lucky if they're making it up into those early teen years. It's obviously a pretty harsh world out there in the animal kingdom. They not only have to worry about fending for themselves, but then also protecting themselves from other predators as well.
Now, something I've learned a handful of years ago, we bought a house in Dover, didn't know much about where we were and what might be in the neighborhood. And one night, my husband and I are outside and we hear this creepy, screeching noise. And we were almost afraid to proceed to go look, thinking, what in the world could be in the woods? And our neighbor, who knows so much more about the area than we do, told us that they were baby barred owls. I was amazed at the noise. It was incredible. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you after you're done hanging out with us, hop on to YouTube or hop on to Google and look up the call that baby barred owls make. It's really quite shocking.
Yeah, the baby owl calls is one of the cutest and craziest noises you'll hear.
It's a crazy noise.
But our barred owls, they're incredibly vocal, the adults as well, especially during the breeding season. We're just coming into barred owl breeding season right now in this late winter into very early spring. So they're getting ready to be on the nest, raising some youngsters very soon here. Especially during that breeding season, you'll hear a wide variety of calls from our barred owls that can be kind of crazy sometimes. They do what's called a caterwauling call during the breeding season. But their most common of their 100+ vocalizations they can do is that "Who cooks for you" call, which is a very iconic one.
Can you do it?
I can attempt to the best of my abilities. Definitely not the most skills, but it's a "Who cooks for you, who cooks for you all" is what we say. So it's a "hoo hoo hoo hoo." So that's my attempt at doing the call.
I like how you managed
As you can see,
keep your volume low too. I was thinking, gosh, how would she react to that?
Yeah.
But knowing that, of course, she knows you like the back of your hand. Now, I can see here, she seems pretty comfortable. Now, we've all heard that an owl can turn the head, 180 degrees? Is that true?
270 degrees, actually.
Holy moly, that's so many more degrees. 270.
Yeah, so that's one of the many crazy physiological adaptations of our owl species, that ability to turn that head 270 degrees is an evolutionary trait that kind of came about due to their lack of ability to turn their eyes in the eye socket. So Fern here, where are we going? Hi there. Fern's eyes are fixed in her skull in what we call a sclerotic ring. So those eyes are fixed forward. So if she wants to look to her right, she has to do an entire head turn right. If she wants to look left, an entire head turn left. They can go 270 degrees around with that head. Incredible eyesight for some of that night vision for nocturnally hunting. And one of the lesser known adaptations of our owls is the ability to fly almost completely silently, which is a really crazy one. Yeah.
That I understand, this one particular video I was watching that they had, you've probably already seen this, the number of microphones set up in a row, and they didn't catch a thing. And now in that video they shared that owls are the only bird that is completely noiseless in flight.
Yeah, so it's due to their incredible structure of both their feathers, their body to wing ratio, and as well as the way in which they create lift using their wings. They're incredibly large wings for their body size. So all of these really soft downy feathers along Fern's chest, as well as some very specially adapted feathers that run along the front edge of her wings that have what we call a fluted edge, almost like a tooth comb-like structure to those feathers that helps them cut through the air almost completely silently.
Amazing. Now, can you tell us a little bit? I'm itching to ask you, Fern. I noticed that you're clicking.
Yeah, that can be a little bit of a defensive thing sometimes.
Okay.
It's just a form of communication. She has been programming with me and her caretakers for almost the entirety of her tenure with us. But obviously, sometimes being this close to new people
Sure.
can be a new
sights,
thing
new
for
smells.
them. Yeah, and obviously some of the lights around here, she definitely is doing a little bit of that just defensive posturing, which isn't always the worst thing in the world. You know, it helps us remind people that these are wild animals. They came to us from the wild. So it's everything that we can do to make them very, as comfortable as possible and just make sure that we're not stressing them out unduly. But she is definitely one of our best educational ambassadors. She does incredibly, incredibly well being out and about in front of pretty large crowds. It's a kind of a side effect of that head injury is a little bit less spatial awareness than some of my other, some of our other friends. But yeah, she's a really great ambassador. We're very lucky to get to work with her.
And I'm guessing that all of this plumage is fluff. How much does she weigh?
Yeah, so pretty much everything that you're looking at here is just all fluff. Our owls in particular, they are much more fluff than they really are body. So if you can see, when I reach in to do a little body check on Fern here,
You get way in there.
I'm not touching her body until I'm up to my second knuckle there on my index finger. So
Wow.
it's incredible, incredible layers of downy feathers that they have to keep them incredibly well insulated. These guys love being out and about in the winter time. They're active all winter long hunting in our region. So all those feathers help keep them warm, help keep them nice and insulated in the winter. So it's a little bit deceiving. She weighs a little under 2 pounds.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Which is kind of about max range for some of our barred owls. She's on the larger size, so yeah,
Wow.
quite light.
Now, where does she stand on the scale of owls? Correct me if I'm wrong. I have it in my mind that the great horned owl is the largest.
The great horned owl is the largest of our year-round resident owls in our area for body
We have
size.
visitors.
Yeah, so the largest by body weight in our region around here is our winter seasonal visitor, the snowy owl. It actually weighs a little bit more than the great horned owl in terms of body size. There we go, good job.
Now they visit from where?
So our snowy owls are coming down to us in the winter time as a warm weather retreat here in winters in New England.
We wouldn't agree that's warm.
From their home range up in the Arctic tundra. So these guys, our snowy owls, are coming all the way down from the Arctic tundra, which is one of the reasons that we actually get a lot of calls during the winter time about the snowy owls that are seen usually spending the winter months along the coastal areas here in the Seacoast region. A lot of people will call us being concerned that the snowy owls are just sitting down on the ground, nesting in the dunes, which is very much part of their natural life cycle. So these guys are coming down to us from areas, they live so far north in the Arctic tundra that there are no trees where they come from. So they are ground nesting owl species. So when they come down to us in the wintertime, they are usually finding a nice comfortable spot on the ground, usually in some dune areas along our beaches to spend their winter months. So if you see a snowy owl on the ground in the wintertime, that is very much their natural habitat. You will see them perched up every once in a while as well, but there's no reason to be concerned if you see a snowy owl down on the ground.
Let them be.
Yeah.
Now, there are many scales of owls. How many types of owls off the top of your head would you say?
So we have a really cool variety of owls here in our region. Quite a few of them are year-round residents, and then we have a lot of these seasonal visitors. So for our year-round permanent residents here in our region, we have the barred owls and the great horned owls are most common. We have their smaller friend, the eastern screech owl, and then the even smallest of our friends that you'd find in our region, the northern saw-whet owl as well.
The smallest of owls.
tiny, tiny little owl species. But then we have quite an abundance of seasonal visitors, and on occasion some of those rare visitors that come by. So we are in an interesting spot here in our area. I almost forgot about the long-eared owl as well.
Don't
A
forget
lesser-known species that can be found year-round, the long-eared owl. But some of the owl species that you'd find around here are some of these seasonal visitors that are coming to us in the different seasons, and some that kind of expanding some of those ranges. So every once in a while you'll hear stories in New England of barn owls being spotted. We are sort of at the northerly extent of their range up here in our area. They are spotted every once in a while, but they're not a permanent year-round resident up here in the seacoast region. And then some of those other species we talked about, like the snowy owl, short-eared owls are another species that you'll find every once in a while traveling through the area.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, again, we have Fern and Bob here with us today. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to let Fern take a breather from being the star of the show. We're going to grab a drink of water. We suggest you do the same. We'll be right back with you.
The center's main mission is to rehabilitate any animal that comes through the door, so that's what we really focus on. We have a vet that, donates a lot of time helping us with surgeries and things we can't do here, but we also do a lot of education. The education, has certainly expanded over the years. 10 years ago we were probably doing about 20 education programs a year, and it was kind of just word of mouth, and last year we did 75 programs. And just exposing kids to all of that, I think, because kids are really the ones that, of course, most of them love animals and they want to do what's right, and a lot of times they end up educating the parents because they've learned the correct thing to do, and they might have a situation. We had a boy actually last year who saw our program in New York schools, and him and his dad stopped to move a turtle, and his dad wanted to put it back in the water. And Kevin said, "No, Dad, Karen from Center for Wildlife said it has to go in the direction it's walking." And the dad said, "Oh, I never knew that." Our main goal is to be able to get these animals back out into their natural habitats and return them back out there. Really our greatest need, especially in the summer, just because there's such a high volume of animals coming through here, is financial support. I mean, some people are great at donating items from the wish list, which is on our website, and those are always helpful because otherwise we're at the store, purchasing the items we need. But really financial contributions so that we can, pay our now $400 a month electric bill from running all these lights and fans and heating pads and everything it takes to, keep these guys warm and so forth. Our expenses are very, very high in the summertime, and we have a lot more staff hours that are put in. So money, bottom line is really what keeps the place going. Turtles are great, and we love to do education with them. We just hope that we're sending the right message to kids that they shouldn't be pets. And sometimes we wonder if, because we're standing up there with, these cute turtles and everything, if we're encouraging kids to want to have them as pets, or if they really listen and don't get them. It's that we don't know, but we try really hard to tell them that they're not an animal that should be our pet, and they certainly should be in the wild. And every animal counts, and if they didn't come here, where would they go? They would just sit out there, or people would keep them, and they wouldn't have a chance. So we feel it's really important to give them all that second chance at life.
Hey, ladies and gents, Alexis here with PPM TV. We're back with Fern and Bob. If you're just joining us, Bob is the Marketing and Outreach Coordinator for the Center for Wildlife in Cape Nettic, which is just next door to Maine. And quick reminder, they're right on Mount Agamenticus. So if you've driven that Mount Agamenticus road, you've gone right by their driveway, and I bet you didn't even know it. And that's by design. So, as I mentioned, Fern is here. She brought Bob with him, and we thank her for that. And we're going to speak a little bit more about Fern, learn a little about rescuing owls, because of course, let me back up, ladies and gentlemen. If you are just joining us, it's very important to understand the Center for Wildlife is a rescue mission. That's what they do. Primary focus is rescuing wildlife. So you can visit, we can do tours, we can do all kinds of fun educational stuff. It is important to remind ourselves that while Fern is here with us today, it's taken both Bob and Fern a great deal of work for her to acclimate to humans, to be comfortable coming out into a new environment and visiting with strangers under new light with new smells and in the daytime, which isn't really her thing. They are nocturnal animals. Now, we were speaking a little bit about Fern's injuries, and I just want to harken back to what Bob was sharing. Most of the creatures that the Center for Wildlife helps, the majority of creatures, are being helped because they have been hit by a car. Can you imagine? So humans are unfortunately the cause of such accidents, and we are also the helper. So Bob, can you tell us a little bit about what to do and what not to do if, heaven forbid, we are the cause of such an interaction, or if we're happening upon a friend of Fern's who may have unfortunately been in such an accident?
Yeah, so even if you're coming across an animal on the roadside where you didn't see them hit by a car, if it's one of our birds of prey, like one of our owls or a hawk or a falcon, it is usually pretty evident whether or not they have been hit by a car. Usually they will let you approach or do not have the ability to get away after sustaining, like Fern here, a head injury or some physical injuries as well. So a few important things to keep in mind. One of the most important things that you can do is actually use Center for Wildlife as a resource in these types of situations. So we have a hotline at Center for Wildlife that is staffed every day. From 9 to 5 every day. So that hotline is a great resource to the community, just to be able to
We're going to put that number up on screen for you.
Yeah, so that hotline's a great resource, just to be able to very quickly hop on the phone and talk to the professionals at Center for Wildlife. So our staff has been working in the industry for years and have pretty much seen it all. So they are usually incredibly timely and very easy to get in contact with about getting some of these tips on what to do when encountering an animal. So I highly recommend, first and foremost, saving that number as well, because usually when you are encountering an injured or orphaned animal, everyone has some heightened emotions.
Oh, yes.
It's a crazy situation. So like any emergency situation, it's always better to be prepared before that situation arises. So saving our number, keeping in mind that we do work with a very defined list of species, but we work with any of the birds that you would find in our area. So if you come across a bird, some things to keep in mind. First and foremost, call our hotline. Our team will talk you through it. You need to be very mindful for our birds of prey. Their primary defense and their primary way of hunting is by using their very sharp and large talons. So the thing you have to be most mindful of when encountering a bird of prey is those talons. They very much will defend themselves. Even our wild animals, after sustaining something like a car collision, they usually can still protect themselves. Us humans, even though we mean the best for them, to a wild animal, a human approaching is a big scary predator coming along. So you have to be mindful that these guys don't know that you're coming up to rescue them. In their mind, if anything, you are only coming to take advantage of their unfortunate situation and potentially eat them for all they know. So you have to keep in mind that they probably are going to defend themselves. We always recommend for people keeping some very basic supplies in the car as well. So a few of the things that you can keep in your car that are really easy to keep, some things that I keep in my car, is a collapsible cardboard box, a towel, and then just a pair of gloves. It can be some winter mittens. It can be, in my situation, what we commonly recommend, a pair of welding gloves or construction gloves, something to protect yourself from any potential harm. But when you come across an animal like a bird that's been hit by a car, usually getting them wrapped in a towel, getting them in an enclosed box like a cardboard box, bringing them in the car, making sure that you have the radio turned off. We don't want to be talking to them because, again, we humans are scary predators. So even if you think you're being a nice and calm and soothing voice to that animal, you're still a predator. So we don't encourage talking to the animals at all. And one of the other things that we always educate about is not trying to feed or water an animal that has been injured. If anything, you're only potentially complicating the issue by causing more harm for them to be ingesting anything after a severe injury. So in the time that you have an animal and are transporting that animal to us, by giving them water, by giving them food, you're not really going to be doing anything beneficial for that animal at that time. If anything, it's only complicating the issue or causing more issues. So we do not recommend giving them food or water and then trying to transport them to a rehabilitator, a licensed rehabilitator like ourselves or a few of our other partners in the area, just because not many of us really have the tools or the knowledge to really properly care for a wild animal at home. So we always recommend, if we are open, getting that animal to us immediately or another rehabilitator in the region, and not trying to keep an animal at home in care. Sometimes
They are not pets.
yes, yes. So it's kind of a hard situation, especially when people are encountering those orphaned animals, those little babies. They really pull on our heartstrings. They look incredibly cute. At the time, they are incredibly cute, but it's important to remember that that animal needs to grow up with the tools that it needs to be able to successfully live a life in the wild. So by taking in especially those orphaned animals, we can actually be very detrimental to the longevity and their survivability in the wild if we are trying to care for them at home. It's best to leave it to the professionals. Like any kind of medical care, if I break my leg riding my bike, I'm not going to go home and just see if my buddy knows how to do leg surgery on me. So use us as a resource, use some of the other rehabilitators in our region as a resource. And we're here obviously today just to get the word out that we are here as a resource to care for these animals. So we are a service to our community. So definitely keep us in mind if you come across any injured or orphaned wildlife.
Something I made a mental note of when you were sharing things not to do during transport. Now, Bob mentioned keeping our voices low or being completely silent, keeping the radio off. I'm going to assume that would be the same for the heater and the air conditioner as well, if possible.
So we actually generally recommend keeping it a little warmer in the car.
Okay.
So usually when we talk about rescue, we talk about getting them in a warm and dark and quiet environment. So when they come to us, we usually have them in a carrier, sometimes on a heating pad, where we're keeping at least the temperature stable. So you don't want to really be blasting the heat, or you don't want to be blasting the air conditioning, just trying to keep the climate relatively stable in the vehicle.
Now, speaking of birds, I'm going to segue into something I found very interesting, which I learned on the Center for Wildlife's website. There's so much great information. In my time preparing for our meeting with Bob and Fern and a few other friends, if you haven't heard that yet, we have a few friends we're meeting. But I did learn about the woodpecker. Now, Bob mentioned keeping a towel. Sure, we might all have a blanket or a towel in the back. You never know. There is one bird in particular I was surprised we shouldn't be using a towel with, which would be the woodpecker.
The woodpeckers,
Why
that's
is that?
right. Yes, so woodpeckers have an incredible tongue that they use for catching little insects inside their trees that they are constantly pecking at all day, which can get caught with the little barbs that they have on their tongues in a towel or a fleece. So if you wrap a woodpecker in a towel or a fleece, sometimes that tongue can come out and get caught on that fleece or that towel. So they're particularly important for our woodpeckers to be mindful that they are not birds of prey. For any of our birds that are not birds of prey, their primary defense is that big old beak that they have. So you very much need to be mindful of that beak when rescuing some of our songbirds or some of our woodpeckers, because they will use that beak as the defense mechanism. But being mindful that the woodpeckers, you have the added complication of them potentially getting their tongues caught on those fleeces or towels.
Yep, that definitely wasn't something I would have expected to learn. But again, as I mentioned, hop on their website because it's good to have the information in the back of your head. You may not remember, you never know when you're going to come across an animal that needs your help and support, and you might not have that immediate reference, but do a quick learning process, a quick refresher. Hop on the website, it'll tell you, what could I do, what do I do, or what don't I do if I find a rabbit or a bird of prey. They have great information. And again, you may not necessarily remember it all at the moment, but things like not using a towel to help a woodpecker, I would have never known. I'll never forget that one. Hopefully, they never need my help. But of course, as we know, what the Center for Wildlife does, their primary mission is rescue, and ideally rehabilitation and release. Now, we're meeting great friends like Fern because she is not releasable. She is a permanent resident and an ambassador who makes these wonderful trips to come see friends like you and I. We can also go and see friends like Fern and Byron. As mentioned, she has a best friend, she has a partner, and they help to raise smaller owlets. And we're about to come into baby season. So as much as it hurts my heart to think that these tiny little friends might need their help so early in life, it's a great opportunity to learn about how they operate, how they work when they're helping foster these little tiny owlets. Can you imagine? What an amazing opportunity. So please make sure that you get up there if you're in the area. Go and find them, go and see them, take a tour, do a quick visit, hop on the internet, give them a call. Now, quick question, Bob. We spoke about, we know about the hotline. It doesn't have to be an emergency. You can call, you get a lot of calls with other questions. If I remember, you get over 15,000 calls a year. Fortunately, they're not all about emergency. What are some of the other things we can call about?
That's right, yeah. So our hotline, while it is primarily an emergency hotline, we do our best to try and keep the line open to be able to field any of those emergency calls. Our team is incredible at doing a lot of education around some preventative maintenance that we can do on our end for reducing human and wildlife conflicts. One of the big points of education that we are constantly on the phone talking to people about is best practice and best ways in which we can coexist with wildlife. We do get a lot of calls from people just purely interested in relocating an animal from their property, which has its whole host of issues that it comes along with that. We could do an entire show just about relocation and why it does not work, why it is not really a great practice. So we do a lot of education on ways in which we can just better coexist with animals. Some of those preventative maintenance that we can do, especially if we are seeing some issues with rodents on people's properties, is one of the major calls that we get. So yeah, our team is great at doing some of that education around what to do in the emergency situations, but then also what not to do in some situations as well, because there are quite a lot of instances where it is really best for both us and the animals involved for us to not intervene. So that's kind of the flip side of the coin, is our team's incredibly knowledgeable about times in which it is improper for us humans to step in and intercede and intervene in a situation. So another thing to keep in mind as a resource.
And when it comes to not intervening, that is not the human specialty.
Yes.
We are quick to step in, put ourselves into a situation where we think we're helping with great intentions. Now, speaking of cohabitating, I know it's Fern, we could feel before the break, Fern was getting a little stressed. So we're going to let Fern go ahead and say farewell to our audience here in a moment. But last but not least, I know that our neighbor, and this is sort of for me, but hopefully you benefit from it too, ladies and gents, owl houses.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Is that something we should be, are we helping?
Yeah, so some of our owl species, like the barred owls, we also have their friends, the eastern screech owl, that are cavity dwellers. They like to live inside the cavities of trees. So we humans, when we see a dead tree on a property, our first instinct is cut that down. I don't want that, get that out of here. So we have cut down a lot of natural cavity habitat for some of our friends, like the barred owls and eastern screech owls. So one thing that we can do is actually provide box housing for barred owls, screech owls as well. Our barred owls, being a larger species like Fern, you can see, require quite a larger nest box. Our eastern screech owl is a little bit smaller, but you can put up specific nest box housing for some owl species. In our region here in the seacoast, if you have any great wetlands near you, which we're lucky to have a lot of around here, if you're near some water, our barred owls, they love wetland habitat, love some of that heavily forested areas where some bodies of water. So we're in great barred owl habitat around here. So yeah, you can definitely look into putting up a nest box.
Now, I know that you can make them, you can find designs to make an owl box on the internet, because the internet has everything, or you can buy them pre-made. Now, how, just lastly, because I could keep it here all day, how high up should they be?
So it really depends on what species you're trying to attract. As a general rule of thumb, you want it to be at least 25 feet up if you think you can manage that. You got to keep in mind that these guys, being a flighted animal, it's a natural instinct for them to seek refuge a little bit higher up. So the higher you're able to get that nest box, the safer they're going to be able to feel. So yeah, we encourage trying to get it up there a little ways. If you have it anywhere, down near the ground, human head height or less or anything like that, you're probably not going to get too many of our owl friends feeling safe in there. Definitely obviously making sure that you're being safe when trying to get it up into a tree. There are a lot of great services in our area. We've got a lot of great tree companies that we partner with, tree service companies that are always keen on helping get nest boxes up there as well. So
that's a great reason to call the Center for Wildlife. They have a reference. They know a tree guy.
Yeah.
It's not so easy to just take your ladder out into the woods. And lastly, I know they need a clear flight path.
Yes, so that's another important thing to keep in mind is they obviously need to have a very clear path of approach as they're coming in and out of that nest box. So just making sure it's in an area that's not really densely covered right in front so that they can have an approach in and out, but then has some cover kind of around it so it's not overly exposed. So you want them to have an area that's
not on the road.
Some denser foliation so that they can feel that it's a comfortable hidden spot, but then clear enough to get themselves up in there.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for coming in, Fern. Thank you for bringing Bob.
Yeah.
It's been a great visit, ladies and gentlemen. Now, of course, we have partnered with the Center for Wildlife, so you're going to see a lot more of Bob. You're going to see a lot more of the friends that they help. Now, let's make a note of that. The Center for Wildlife is there to help animals. They are there for rescue, rehabilitation, and ideally release. When there isn't an opportunity to release, and that could be injury, illness, there are a litany of reasons. And please keep in mind, Fern lives with permanent injuries and she is not releasable. So just because she looks like a perfect specimen, like many of us, she lives with limitations that prevent her from exploring and being out on her own. So it's because of the Center for Wildlife and because of people like Bob and a huge team of people behind him who aren't on the stage with us today that Fern and Byron and all of the friends over at the center are able to live a rich life. And because of that, they're able to come out into the community and help us learn what we can and what we shouldn't do to help. Now, I've mentioned before, and I'm going to keep singing it, please keep in mind that the Center for Wildlife is a nonprofit organization. Now, I say nonprofit, and that means we know that we can certainly donate. You know who's not donating? They don't receive grant money. They don't receive grant money from the government. They are completely dependent upon our dollars and our support. So without people like me, like you, like Bob, the people behind the scenes here at the station, without our support, without our dollars, without us getting the word out, they are underfunded. They may always be underfunded because they receive only 1 to 3% of charitable giving across the nation. Can you imagine? Only 1 to 3% of charitable giving in our nation, in the United States, goes toward the help for wildlife and ecological issues. So we could step up our game just a little bit. Please hop on Facebook. Remember to like the Center for Wildlife. Get a t-shirt. Go take a tour. Make sure you see an owl symposium. Send them a few dollars, whatever you can do. Help spread the word. There are so many people that say, geez, I didn't even know they exist. Well, we're helping to solve that. Now we know they exist. And we know that they need us as much as Fern and Byron need them. So thank you so much for supporting PPM TV, ladies and gentlemen. We too are a nonprofit, and it's because of partnerships like this that we can all get the word out and grow our community. Again, the Center for Wildlife is in Cape Nettic, right up by Mount Agamenticus. And if you're watching this on YouTube from very far away, hop on their website, which you'll see on the screen. Don't forget about that hotline. Plug it right into your phone. Save it, because you never know. You never know when you can help.